In March 2025, a press release claimed radar had found a vast underground city beneath the Pyramid of Koffra, stretching more than 2,000 feet down, deeper than the Eiffel Tower is tall. It went viral within days, racking up millions of views across social media. There was just one problem. The radar technology behind the claim is not physically capable of doing what its own creators said it did, and the scientists who actually study this exact technology said so immediately on the record. This is the story of the Koffra project, one of the most widely shared archaeological claims of 2025, and the surprisingly clear, well-documented reason nearly every actual expert in the relevant field, from radar engineers to Egypt's own former Minister of Antiquities, rejected it almost immediately. This isn't a story about a mystery that remains unsolved. It's the opposite. It's a story about how a genuinely impossible technical claim managed to travel around the world, collect millions of views, and convince a huge number of people before the actual physics of the technology involved ever caught up with it. Let's start with what was actually claimed, because the scale of it is a big part of why it spread so fast. On March 15, 2025, a research group led by Corrado Malanga, a professor at the University of Pisa, and Filippo Biondi, a radar researcher affiliated with the University of Strathclyde, released a press announcement describing what they called the Koffra project. According to their statement, satellite-based radar scans had revealed 8 massive cylindrical shafts descending as deep as 2,100 feet beneath the Koffra pyramid, connected to 5 stacked multi-level chamber structures near the pyramid's base, all linked by geometric passageways and a tunnel system, reportedly extending roughly 2 kilometers, potentially connecting all 3 of Giza's major pyramids together underground. Some of these described chambers were said to be roughly 80 meters across, comparable in size to an Olympic swimming pool. The scale of the claim alone was enough to guarantee massive attention. This wasn't a modest, cautious announcement about a small anomaly worth investigating further. It was presented as a near-complete discovery of an entire hidden underground city, a claim significant enough that, if true, would represent one of the most important archaeological findings in modern history. Here's the detail that made the story spread even faster. The claim came packaged with an explanation for why mainstream Egyptology hadn't found it already. The narrative embedded in the announcement, and repeated widely across the videos and articles covering it, suggested that established archaeological authorities, and specifically Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former Minister of Antiquities, were either unable or unwilling to acknowledge what had supposedly been found, implying institutional resistance, reputational self-interest, or even deliberate suppression. That framing did a lot of work. It transformed a technical claim that could, in principle, simply be checked against physics and evidence into a narrative about hidden truths and gatekeeping experts, which is a substantially more shareable, emotionally compelling story than a dry technical dispute about radar penetration depth. It's worth understanding exactly why that particular framing is so effective, because it shows up in this genre of content constantly, well beyond just this one claim. A suppression narrative does something clever to any piece of contrary evidence presented afterward. It converts that evidence into further proof of the conspiracy itself. If an independent radar expert says the technology can't work at these depths, the narrative can reframe that expert as either compromised or simply another gatekeeper protecting the establishment's version of history. If Egypt's own Antiquities Authority denies the claim outright, that denial itself gets absorbed into the story as evidence of exactly the cover-up being alleged. This creates a genuinely difficult rhetorical trap. Legitimate scientific rebuttal, rather than settling the question, becomes recast as additional confirmation that something must be being hidden, since surely nobody would push back this hard against something that wasn't true. Recognizing this specific pattern, a claim structured so that any expert disagreement simply gets absorbed as further proof of suppression, is often more useful for evaluating a claim's credibility than trying to independently verify every individual technical detail yourself. Now here's where the claim runs directly into a problem that has nothing to do with archaeology at all, and everything to do with basic, well-established physics. The technology behind these claims is called synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, a real, legitimate, widely used technique in fields ranging from satellite geography to military reconnaissance to genuine archaeological remote sensing. SAR works by sending radar pulses toward a surface and analyzing the reflected signal to build a detailed image, and satellite-based SAR is genuinely useful for mapping surface features, detecting subtle ground movement, and, in some specific conditions, revealing very shallow subsurface features, typically penetrating at most a few meters into dry, loose material like sand under ideal conditions. Understanding why depth matters so much here requires knowing a basic property of how radar interacts with different materials. Radar signal penetration depth depends heavily on the frequency of the signal and the density and composition of the material it's passing through. Signals that can travel meaningful distances through loose, dry sand lose energy far more rapidly when passing through dense, solid limestone. the actual bedrock material making up the Giza Plateau and the pyramids themselves, this isn't a subtle or debatable point among radar physicists. It's a well-established, mathematically modeled limitation that shows up consistently across decades of published research on ground-penetrating and satellite radar systems. And it's precisely the limitation Professor Conyers was pointing to when he expressed doubt about the Koffra project's claimed depths. The claim made by the Koffra project team required the same satellite-based technology to penetrate not meters, but hundreds of meters, in some versions of the claim more than 600 meters, through dense, solid limestone bedrock, the exact material the Giza Plateau and the pyramids themselves are built from and sit upon. Professor Lawrence Conyers, a genuine expert in subsurface radar imaging at the University of Denver, reviewed these specific claims and expressed direct, on-record doubt that the technology involved could penetrate dense limestone to anywhere near the depths described. This isn't a matter of professional disagreement over interpretation. Radar signal penetration through solid rock is a well-understood, mathematically predictable limitation based on the physical properties of the material and the frequency of the radar signal involved. Satellite SAR, specifically, is fundamentally limited in how deep it can see through solid rock, and the depths claimed by the Koffra project team are simply far beyond what the underlying physics of this specific technology allows, regardless of how the resulting data is processed or interpreted afterward. It's also worth noting what the research team's own prior, actually peer-reviewed work claimed, because the contrast is telling. Their 2022 paper, published in the journal Remote Sensing, described considerably more modest internal features detected within the Great Pyramid itself, not vast chambers hundreds of meters underground, but smaller-scale internal structural details. Independent researchers, reviewing that earlier, peer-reviewed paper noted that a small, ambiguous void detected through this method could easily be misinterpreted as a much grander structure without direct physical corroboration through excavation or an entirely separate detection method, exactly the kind of independent confirmation that was present for the legitimate 2017 muon tomography discovery and completely absent from the 2025 announcement. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former Minister of Antiquities and one of the most prominent authorities on Giza specifically, responded to the claims directly and unambiguously. Speaking to multiple international outlets, Hawass stated plainly that no radar devices or modern technologies had detected the structures being described, calling the underlying methods neither scientifically approved nor validated. He pointed to decades of legitimate, well-documented prior research at Giza, including muon tomography, a genuinely different and far better established technique for imaging large stone structures using naturally occurring subatomic particles, along with gravimetry and conventional ground-penetrating radar, none of which had ever detected anything resembling the vast structures described in the 2025 announcement. Muon tomography detects naturally occurring cosmic ray particles called muons, which pass through solid rock at predictable rates that change when they encounter hidden voids. And this technique genuinely did reveal a real, previously unknown void inside the Great Pyramid in 2017, a legitimate discovery published in the peer-reviewed journal Nature and confirmed through multiple independent detector systems. That 2017 discovery is genuinely worth understanding in detail because it stands as the clearest possible contrast to how the 2025 Koffra project claims were handled. The Scan Pyramids project, an international collaboration involving researchers from Japan, France, and Egypt, placed multiple different types of muon detectors at different locations, both inside and around the Great Pyramid, deliberately using more than one independent detection technology, specifically so that a result appearing in only one dataset could be dismissed as a technical artifact, while a result confirmed across multiple independent systems could be trusted with far greater confidence. When their data revealed a previously unknown, roughly 30-meter-long void above the Grand Gallery, the team held the finding for peer review, published their methodology and raw data transparently, and described the discovery cautiously as a void of unknown function rather than immediately declaring it to be a hidden chamber, a secret passage, or evidence of any specific ancient purpose. That level of caution and methodological transparency is precisely what allowed the finding to be widely accepted by the broader scientific and archaeological community without significant controversy. That earlier discovery is worth mentioning specifically because it shows what a genuine, properly verified anomaly detection actually looks like. Multiple independent research teams, converging results across different detection methods, peer review before public announcement, and a discovery scaled appropriately to what the evidence actually showed. A single void, not an entire underground metropolis. The Koffra project's 2025 announcement followed almost none of that pattern. The specific claims about the vast underground city had not undergone peer review at the time they were publicly announced. The only peer-reviewed publication connected to this research team was a considerably more modest 2022 paper, published in the journal Remote Sensing, describing limited internal features detected within the Great Pyramid itself, a far smaller and more constrained claim than the 2025 announcement describing an entire city-scale complex beneath a different, neighboring pyramid. Fact-checking organizations that examined the claim independently reached consistent conclusions. Investigations by outlets including Snopes and Egyptian Streets found no credible scientific evidence supporting the underground city claims, and noted that no credible news outlets or established scientific publications had verified the specific 2025 findings independently. The pattern these fact-checkers identified is a familiar one in the broader history of Giza-related claims specifically. A dramatic, headline-ready announcement spread rapidly through media and social platforms before independent verification could catch up, building on a long-running, previously established fringe theory, in this case connected to a 1998 book proposing Giza functioned as an ancient power plant, like an idea with no mainstream scientific support that has nonetheless persisted and resurfaced repeatedly in various forms for over 2 decades. It's worth understanding just how much additional, unrelated speculative material tends to get bundled alongside claims like this one, because it reveals how these narratives are typically constructed. Content built around the Koffra project claims frequently invokes the so-called inventory stela, an inscription discovered near the pyramids that some fringe researchers cite as evidence the Sphinx and other Giza monuments predate Egypt's accepted dynastic timeline. Mainstream Egyptologists have examined this specific artifact extensively and largely conclude it dates from a much later period than the Old Kingdom, likely composed as a form of religious or political narrative centuries after the pyramids were actually built, rather than serving as a reliable historical record of the monument's true age. Similarly, references to controversial geological interpretations of Sphinx erosion patterns and broader claims about a lost pre-dynastic civilization tied to younger Dryas era flooding roughly 12,000 years ago represent genuinely separate, independently disputed claims in their own right, each with their own complicated evidentiary history, bundled together here specifically because stacking multiple mysterious-sounding claims together creates a stronger overall impression of hidden, suppressed history than any single claim could produce on its own, even when none of the individual claims involved have actually been verified. That bundling technique is worth naming directly because it shows up constantly in this specific genre of content. Rather than resting on one claim strong enough to stand up to scrutiny on its own, this kind of narrative works by combining several separate, individually weak or disputed claims into a single overwhelming impression, so that even a viewer skeptical of any one specific piece can still walk away feeling like, surely all of this together must mean something. It's a rhetorical strategy, not an evidentiary one, and recognizing it is often the fastest way to spot this pattern and other similar claims before you've even had time to fact-check the individual details. Now, here's the detail that deserves real attention, because it's the part of this story that goes beyond just one radar claim, the specific rhetorical strategy this kind of content consistently relies on, and why it works so effectively regardless of the underlying evidence. Content built around this claim, including the version many people encountered directly, consistently invoked a specific comparison, pointing to Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, 2 genuinely real, legitimately significant archaeological sites in modern Turkey that were, in fact, initially met with skepticism before being fully accepted by mainstream archaeology. That comparison is technically accurate as far as it goes. Those sites are real, they are remarkable, and mainstream archaeology's understanding of them did evolve considerably after their discovery. But invoking that history to imply that the Koffra project's claims deserve the same eventual vindication skips over the actual reason Göbekli Tepe was eventually accepted. Independent, peer-reviewed excavation, physical verification through direct archaeological digging, and reproducible evidence that any qualified researcher could examine and confirm for themselves. The Koffra project's claims, by contrast, rest entirely on a single team's interpretation of satellite radar data that outside experts in that same specific technology have directly disputed on physical, technical grounds, with no independent excavation or corroborating detection method confirming any of it. That distinction matters enormously, and it's worth being direct about it. Skepticism eventually proven wrong in one case does not mean skepticism is always eventually proven wrong. Some extraordinary claims turn out to be true after rigorous verification, like Göbekli Tepe. Others turn out to be false after that same rigorous verification is actually applied. And simply asserting a parallel to history's famous vindicated underdogs without providing the same kind of evidence that actually vindicated them is a storytelling technique, not a scientific argument. So here's where the honest picture of this entire controversy actually lands. The claim of a vast underground city beneath the Khafre pyramid relies on a specific technology, satellite-based synthetic aperture radar, being used far beyond its established physically understood capabilities, a limitation independently confirmed by a qualified radar expert with no connection to Egyptology or any institutional stake in the outcome. It was announced without peer review, contradicted decades of legitimate prior research using genuinely validated techniques like muon tomography, and was rejected on the record by the same Egyptian Antiquities Authority who has overseen and participated in that decades-long, well-documented body of prior research. Independent fact-checking organizations examining the claim reached the same conclusion through entirely separate investigations. It's worth being fair to the researchers involved on one specific point. Nothing about this story requires assuming deliberate deception. Enthusiasm for a genuinely exciting possible discovery, combined with a research method still relatively new and not yet fully validated at these extreme depths, can produce exactly this kind of overconfident public announcement without any deliberate intent to mislead anyone. The problem isn't necessarily bad faith. It's a mismatch between the confidence of the claim and the actual state of the supporting evidence. Released to the public before the normal scientific process, peer review, independent replication, physical corroboration, had a chance to catch up. None of this means Giza has given up every secret it holds. Genuine, rigorously verified discoveries, like the real void found through muon tomography in 2017, prove the plateau can still legitimately surprise researchers using properly validated methods. What this specific case demonstrates is something different and, in its own way, more useful to understand. How a technically impossible claim, wrapped in a genuinely compelling narrative about suppressed truth and dismissive gatekeepers, can travel further and faster than the actual physics and evidence underneath it, and how the loudest, most viral version of a story is not automatically the most accurate one. What's left is a real lesson about how discoveries like this actually get verified, and how easily that verification process can get outrun by a good story. Genuine breakthroughs at Giza, when they happen, tend to look like the 2017 muon tomography discovery. Peer-reviewed, independently confirmed, and modest enough in scope to match what the evidence actually showed. Claims that skip that process entirely, however dramatic, deserve exactly the kind of scrutiny this one eventually received. So we want to ask you directly, when a claim this big goes viral this fast, what's the one question you'd want answered before believing it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the kind where the real discovery is understanding how a claim spreads faster than the truth can catch up to it, make sure you're subscribed, because next time we're heading somewhere just as remarkable. Until then, stay curious and keep questioning the version of history you were handed.